A question for you all this Friday night. Have you ever described yourself as Jewish? Not Jewish, but Jew-ish. My guess is probably not, especially if you're not actually Jewish. But lying about being Jewish or Jewish and about being the descendant of Holocaust survivors are among the many, many documented and absurd lies that we know of so far from New York's Republican Congressman-elect George Santos. Here is how he tried to defend himself earlier this week.
My heritage is Jewish. I've always identified as Jewish. I was raised a practicing Catholic. I think I've gone through this. Even I've not being raised a practicing Jew. I've always joked with friends and circles, even in the campaign, I'd say, guys, I'm Jewish. Remember, I was raised Catholic.
Guys, I'm Jewish. Yes, he actually said that. And if that isn't enough, it appears that Santos has lied about, well, basically everything. His education, his finances, his employment history, and even the date of his own mother's death. He's now admitted to lying on his resume and apologized for that. But in a normal world, all of these many fabrications might be a huge problem for a politician like Santos. But we live in a post-Trump world. The problem is not how many lies one tells, especially if you're on the right, but which ones the public, and especially the GOP base, remember or even care about. And by that measure, Santos appears to fit right into the modern GOP. Here now, Victoria DeFrancesco Soto, Dean of the Clinton School of Public Service at the University of Arkansas, and Tim Miller, a contributor to The Bulwark and the former communications director for Jeb Bush. Both are MSNBC contributors. Thank you for joining me. Tim, let me start with you. I'm not wrong, am I? At one time in the not-too-distant past, such brazen lying would not have been tolerated even by the GOP. So is this the congressman-elect that the modern GOP deserves?
Yeah, I think so. And look, even in the modern GOP, you saw them say enough to Madison Cawthorn just about a year ago, right? And what was the reason? What was different between Cawthorn and Santos? Well, Cawthorn wasn't useful anymore. Okay? Cawthorn was actually a problem. He was a troublemaker. Meanwhile, Kevin McCarthy needs every vote he can get to be speaker.
Yes.
To get to 218 votes, he needs George Santos desperately. So even this Republican Party that's gotten completely comfortable with charlatans and morons like Herschel Walker and Dr. Oz and all these other freaks that ran in the midterms, even now they might say this guy's a step too far if they didn't need him. But Kevin McCarthy needs them, and Kevin McCarthy has shown that if he needs somebody politically, he's willing to debase himself in order to defend him. We've seen that plenty of times with President Trump, and we're seeing it right now with George Santos.
We are indeed. Victoria, the GOP might try, but it can't deny that without Trump, there would be no George Santos. I mean, here's how Santos himself described his connection to the former president last year. Have a listen.
Growing up as a kid who would walk by Trump Tower and look up and say, Mom, one day I want to have a building with my name on it, and I went to business school because of Donald Trump.
Wow.
I ran for Congress because I thought Donald Trump, if he made it, it was the time for everybody to have an opportunity.
I mean, you can't really get rid of Santos, even if they wanted to, when he is the personification of the de facto leader of the GOP.
It's a culture that we've seen within the party in terms of denigrating the truth, right? The truth no longer holds valor. And I think that in addition to this piece, that the candidates can brazenly lie. And I mean, the magnitude of his lies are so shocking. But also, I'm going to pivot for a second and also highlight, just as a public, as a society, our lack of really being engaged in the news, in civics. There used to be a time, when my dad was little, where there was civics education. We don't have that anymore. So I think that there's a ton of blame on the George Santoses of the Trumps of the world, of the GOP. But also, as a society, we need to flex our muscle and relearn how to be critical again, how to seek out the truth and not just passively digest whatever is thrown at us.
Tim, and just picking up on what Victoria's saying there about the lies. I mean, the lies, we've seen the Trumpian lies, and we've seen other lies about, we've seen the big lie about the election. And I've spent a lot of the last 2 to 3 years just talking about lies. But this guy seems to be on a different level. He's lying about stuff he doesn't need to lie about. lies that don't even make sense, where he himself is putting on Twitter his mother's death date as different at different times. I mean, this seems to be beyond a political problem. I don't want to diagnose him from afar, I'm not a doctor, but what is wrong with this guy?
Yeah, and that's compulsive lying. Just as an example, they played that clip. He said he went to business school because of Donald Trump. I also don't think that's true. I think that any clip you play of him, right, you're going to find a lie in there because his entire resume is fabricated. And this is a person that couldn't pay rent a little while ago, and he was a deadbeat tenant for multiple at multiple apartments in New York. The New York Times, the original New York Times story said that he stole checks from a patient that his mother was nursing in order to buy shoes. So it seems to me this is a person that has fabricated their entire life story, and that is a category difference from the types of lies we're used to in politics. I was valedictorian when really you were third in your class, or, I graduated from this college when, you were one credit short, right? That's not what this is. He's making stuff up out of whole cloth.
Indeed, and we know that thanks to reporting from the New York Times, but a lot of people have wondered why the New York Times didn't do this reporting beforehand. He's a New York congressman. A lot of people have wondered where the Democrats were, Victoria, beforehand on this. Where was the Oppo research? I mean, to lose the House because you didn't do well in New York and to lose a seat in New York to this guy, it's pretty embarrassing now in hindsight.
Well, and it's Oppo 101. This is where you start. You start on the ground looking for these clues. And I think the other thing here is just that folks took them for granted, right? That when he ran in 2020, he lost by 13, 14 points. So when he ran again, people didn't take him seriously. And, another rule of politics is you always run scared, even if you've got a big lead, even if you've got a lot of money in the bank, even if your party is the dominant one in the district or the state. You need to run scared looking over your shoulder. And the Democrats didn't do that. And I think that if there's any lesson from this is look behind you, and something like a George Santos can happen to you if you don't.
Yes. And Tim, just before we finish, you mentioned that McCarthy is silent because he'll disgrace himself in a hunt for votes because he's so desperate to be speaker. Will he ever be speaker? Yes or no?
Yeah, I think so, but it's going to be very narrow, and he might have to cut this deal, which would allow 5 members to call for a vote to get rid of him, which would mean that he's going to maybe get to be speaker and get the bust that he so craves, but probably won't be speaker for very long.
Victoria, do you think he'll be Speaker of the House come January 2023? His dream, which he's been willing to sell out any principles he may have had for that dream. Do you think he'll make it?
I think he will. I'm not sure if he's going to get a majority, though. The historian me looks back at 2 other times in history where there were dozens and dozens of ballots, and maybe we get to a point where the House says we can't get a majority for Kevin McCarthy. We've got to stop at some point. Let's just agree to go with a plurality. So we'll see.
Intriguing times ahead.